Behalf of
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, what it may be. I'm Mia Mikic, and I'm speaking here on behalf of Xiankun Lu. He's the CEO of Friends of Multilateralism Group. Just a few words of introduction to put everyone on the same sort of wavelength. Here, the Friends of Multilateralism Group was established in 2016 in Geneva, and is a group of independent experts. Most of them are former diplomats and the sort of ambassadors at the WTO or UN. There are also some independent experts, and of course some of the private sector representatives. We welcome all in this open session. This is the fifth session of the high-level dialogue series on the future of the WTO reform. And today's moderation is in very good hands of our Patrick Law, who will be introducing our special guests, Ambassador Amina Mohamed. So in the interest of time, Patrick, the microphone is yours. Please.
Thank you, Mia, and welcome everybody. I expect some more people will be joining, but we have to finish very sharply at 5 on this occasion. So it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome Ambassador Dr. Amina Mohamed, whose name will be well known to all of you, and whose CV I think you saw. It'll take too long to give proper justice to a CV, so you can read the blurb that came around with the announcement if you need to. I don't think most people know. So, Amina, it's really a great pleasure to welcome you. We've had meetings with Pascal Lamy, Tim Grosser, Alec Irwin, and Arantxa Gonzalez in this series. So that's what you're participating in, and we're expecting you to impart wisdom, understanding, insight, and all the virtuous things that will help us to progress, those of us who actually have any decision power to ensure the progress, which would exclude me for starters, and a number of other people I can see here. So, Amina, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I see so many of my friends, here at this session. And I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me to your friends group. I know, as I said, I'm among friends and friends who care deeply about the multilateral trading system. I am also aware that at the moment, the atmospherics are challenging for all those who want to see a change in the pace of progress at the WTO in an increasingly complex world of interlocking policy issues involving trade relationships. The growing diversity of policy challenges with global reach have stretched our capacity for agreements across a wider range of issues. And I think friends should remember that I've argued before that the system should be anchored on 3 principles: on recovery, on renewal, and on reform. And that, to my mind, means rebuilding trust, widening inclusivity, and delivering concrete results for the system. That clarity comes from time spent with many of you at the WTO, as well as time that I spent as Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. I learned a lot from my conversations with many of you and with colleagues in Geneva, but also in Nairobi during the ministerial meeting that we held. And all of you, and most of those that I had consultations with, understood both the strengths of our organization then and the pressure points where our collective effort is most urgently needed to make the system work as intended. And so today, I'm going to structure my remarks in 2 parts. First, the institutional fixes that the WTO needs. Second, the subject-specific updates that can make our rules fit for today's economy, for today's realities. Both are essential to an honest and productive dialogue between friends and among friends. And so I'll start with the institutional reform. And I think it's no secret that the WTO's negotiating arm must regain its decisiveness. Members should safeguard a consensus that is credible and that is durable. One that I feel should be grounded and must be grounded in transparent, evidence-based economic priorities rather than tactical or arbitrary objections. Consensus must be aligned with shared, and I'd like to underline that, global imperatives. Our compass remains the Marrakesh Preamble. Raise living standards, support full employment, expand trade in goods and services, steward resources for sustainable development, protect the environment, and ensure that developing and especially LDCs secure a fair share of trade-driven growth. A negotiation function anchored in these purposes will, to my mind, both be legitimate and effective. I could give many examples, but allow me to ground this in agriculture. And because Cecilia is here with us, I think she will remember a lot of the discussions that we held. Agriculture, which I negotiated and later chaired at the Nairobi Ministerial. For years, talks stalled, and Cecilia would remember this, of export subsidies, export credits, and food aid. Some members feared that rapid subsidy cuts would shock farm incomes and food security at home. In Nairobi, we broke that deadlock. Ministers agreed to eliminate all agricultural export subsidies, and you remember it was with immediate elimination for developed countries and phased timelines for developing members. Tightened rules on export financing and state trading, and put clearer guardrails on international food aid to avoid commercial displacement. These were practical reforms born out of inclusive consultations that turned long-term standing objections into a balanced package with real implementation tracks. The same may be said about the Doha Declaration on the TRIPS Agreement and public health. Through continuous dialogue and truthful negotiations, candid and honest, we secured a deal that was useful for developing countries. Now, these agreements may not be perfect, but they are perfect examples of the results of faithful negotiations, political goodwill, which place the needs of all at the forefront. Second, dispute settlement. That function has long been described as the crown jewel of the WTO. Today, with the benefit of hindsight and reflection, we are better placed to distinguish what in this system works well and what demands reform. This makes now the right moment to clarify what remains indispensable for WTO members. Above all, we must restore an effective dispute settlement body that's truly accessible to all members, large and small. And let me also say that I recognize the significant work that has already been undertaken through both formal and informal consultations and the sustained engagement within the General Council. But these discussions must now evolve into guided, needs-based negotiations that remain trapped in interest and should not remain trapped in interest-based positioning. A key feature of any credible dispute settlement process is independence and predictability, where decisions are respected because they're impartial, because they're timely, and because they're enforceable across the membership. And on this note, I'd like to commend the efforts that have been led by Marco Molina in shepherding the informal reform discussions on taking forward dispute settlement reform. The MPIA inspired and aspire to fill the void after the erosion of the appellate body-based system. I should note that the success which some members hope to achieve through this temporary fix is limited. It's limited by the reality that members are free to appeal findings into the void, absent a functioning appellate body. Next, I'll take up the joint initiatives. Non-MFN multilateral agreements have been few and far between, with government procurement being the major multilateral in the WTO. The joint initiatives, on the other hand, aspire to move trade agendas forward, but without discriminating against non-signatories or insisting upon commitments on the part of all members. JIs can contribute importantly to WTO rulemaking, thus advancing the MTS. These agreements are designed to allow a coalition of the willing to move ahead while keeping the door open for others, for everybody else. Experience shows that when properly structured, such arrangements can deliver meaningful trade benefits. And a good example, again from Nairobi, is the Information Technology Agreement. It was concluded in 1997. It expanded duty-free trade in IT products. Within just over a decade, exports of ITA covered goods nearly tripled, reaching about $1.4 trillion by 2010. And that's around 9.5% of world merchandise trade. GIs can serve as important engines of growth because they allow members to capture sector-specific dynamism while contributing to the wider objective of making trade flows more efficient, more inclusive, and more development-friendly, avoiding the risks of exclusion. On special and differential treatment, I would argue that it remains a core feature of the multilateral trading system. The real question, however, is whether it should continue in its current broad form, or whether we need a more targeted approach. S&DT should be guided by clear, objective criteria so that it's not abstract, but is predictable and is effective. In practice, this would mean that flexibilities are reserved for those members who genuinely need them, while others can opt out voluntarily. That, after all, was the intention of the original drafters, to balance fairness with development needs. And here China's announcement that it will not seek special and differential treatment in WTO talks, nor benefit from S&DT, according to others, is to me a welcome step in the right direction. It opens space to recalibrate S&DT. Secondly, on subject matter reform, I'd like to commend WTO members on the successful conclusion of the first phase of the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement, which entered into force on the 15th of September this year. Of course, the delivery implementation of this agreement now hinges on capacity support and the outcomes of the second vital wave of negotiations, which would address overcapacity and overfishing concerns. And this is where the interests of the countries in the South actually lie. These issues are of particular concern to developing countries, and it's encouraging to see momentum building, where countries that previously relied on such subsidies have had time to adjust, and the discussions now reflect a stronger sense of shared responsibility. We must not forget that at stake are finite marine resources, sometimes referred to as fugitive resources. And the pace at which we deplete them will depend on how responsibly and equitably we proceed from here. On digital trade, there's an urgent need for members to continue serious engagement under the framework of the e-commerce work program. A balanced dialogue must ensure clarity and stability in the treatment of digital services, while also safeguarding the fiscal space that many members depend on. Only then can the WTO build a digital rulebook that is fair, that is forward-looking, and that is responsive to the needs of all economies. The e-commerce moratorium clock runs out in March of next year. Let's use this time to craft rules that safeguard fiscal space while giving digital trade the predictability and certainty that it needs. For countries like mine, a moratorium would be a welcome outcome. If the goal is truly people-centered and the ambition to uplift MSMEs genuine growth, then a platform that would trigger arbitrary fiscal measures would kill the dream of those MSMEs. And this is a discussion that I've had with those that are in this country, in Kenya, and that have been using e-commerce much more than they did in the past. Opening up markets and attracting sustainable investment, as is our goal under the AFCFTA, Digital Trade Protocol, means minimizing uncertainty in market access conditions and maintaining a predictable investment climate. We need to maintain disciplines that avoid the arbitrary fiscal measures that would threaten our people-centered ambitions and uphold the predictable investment climate we're building through frameworks like the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol, as well as the Technology Agreement. The WTO's rules on subsidies are increasingly out of step with traditional trade disciplines. Members are turning to green subsidies, state-owned enterprises, and industrial support measures to drive growth, innovation, and climate transitions. To preserve credibility, the WTO must update its rulebook. The first step is straightforward: transparency and accountability. Members must comply with their notification obligations under the Subsidies and Countervailing Measures Agreement, so that negotiations are grounded in accurate, up-to-date information. And I would also say that without that credible data, the system would not be able and cannot distinguish between measures that distort trade and those that support legitimate public policy goals, including vital R&D. A modernized subsidy framework should focus on clarity, on fairness, and sustainability, ensuring policy space for development while tackling harmful spillovers. The conclusion of the Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement, with 127 WTO members signaling their participation, is a landmark achievement. The IFD agreement is more than a technical exercise. It's the first WTO agreement in decades to embed a real development lens into its design. The first to focus on the intersection of trade and investment facilitation, and the first to test how deals of this kind can be integrated into the multilateral system without undermining it. If we manage this well, we'll not only deliver tangible gains in investment flows and job creation, but also demonstrate that the WTO can still adapt to new realities and do so in a way that places development at the center. Otherwise, I would argue, we will weaken the credibility of the institution itself, as rules negotiated outside clear parameters risk being contested, underutilized, or seen as undermining the principle of non-discrimination. Mr. Moderator, Patrick, I would like to stop here, so that we can have some level of engagement. I I'm looking forward to listening to friends and colleagues around the table on some of the issues that I have raised. Hopefully, from their comments, I will be able to learn a lot more than I have so far. And it will just be interesting, I think, to have a nice, discourse amongst friends. And so I'd like to thank you for your attention and listen to your comments rather than questions, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amina. Just one small thing before we get going. Mia, I lost contact, completely lost my connection during Amina's speech. If this occurs again, please take over, okay? Thank you. Right, I see that Alan's asking for the floor. Alan.
Good day to you, Amina, and welcome back to Friends of Multilateralism. Add my thanks to others for your service. Nairobi was a high point in recent history for the WTO, and there aren't a lot of high points. The Prime Minister of Singapore is a lengthy interview this morning in the Financial Times in which he says we have to adjust to a world in which the United States has stepped back. And that was quite obvious, really, many years ago. Maybe not in Nairobi. I wasn't at Nairobi, so I can't tell. But since then, the United States has stepped back. And the question is, who's stepping forward? And middle-sized countries, not confined to developed, I would say. Where do you see the leadership for the system emerging?
Thanks, Alan. Let's ask Carlos and then back to you, Amina, with the two questions, please.
Thanks, Patrick. Amina, good to see you. As Alan, I also have fond memories of Nairobi. At that time, I wrote a piece basically entitled, "Who Killed Doha?" And I said that it reminded me of one Agatha Christie book, where everybody is guilty. But the recommendations that you made make a lot of sense, but I have an unfair question, which is the following. As we know, without the support of the two major economic powers, the future of WTO will continue to be iffy, to say the least. So, what are your suggestions for movement during, at least, the Trump administration in power?
So, Amina, I think that Alan's and Carlos's questions are aiming pretty much at the same thing. Who's in charge? Who should be in charge? How's this going to go forward? Over to you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. And I'm really, really happy to again to see all of you. Let me say this. I think the leadership should come from all of us. And I think Nairobi, in a way, was a reflection of that. That when we all come together collaboratively, and when the big players actually agree to play the role that they must, then we have wins like Nairobi. And I would also agree with Alan that Nairobi was a real high point. And Alan, let me just tell you that, and friends who are there will confirm that the US played a very constructive role in Nairobi, very, very, and Cecilia is nodding her head. And it didn't matter, what subject matter we're tackling. We were very, very content with that leadership. And obviously, after Nairobi, my hope was that that level of engagement and that level of comfort to the system would continue to be provided by the big players. But also, let me say that the leadership of the EU at that point, and Cecilia was the trade commissioner, was key to unlocking, some of the some of the challenges that we were facing, to giving us, a way forward. Celia was very, very engaged together with her team. And so I think all of us kind of came together in Nairobi to show that when we all come together, that in fact we get the results that we deserve. More than anything else, and that we worked very, very hard for. And I think that, and then I'll stop talking about Nairobi and focus on what was asked of me. But I think that in Nairobi too, the ministers took over. The ministers took over, and I know that many of you have argued, for the need of political direction, which is critical for negotiations to take place. And so that's what really happened. The fact that the ministers took over and said, look, we actually didn't have much from Geneva at that point. There was really nothing that we could, put our hooks onto that had come from Geneva. And we sat down and said, okay, we cannot go back with nothing, and we can't allow this to fail. So let's really work hard to make sure that we get a declaration out of Nairobi. And really the ministers, kind of rose to the occasion and did what they needed to do. But they've done that, since then with the fisheries, agreement, and with other, agreements and arrangements that have been put in place, including the JIs. So look, the question that has been asked of me is quite unfair, because again, and I can see Victor smiling. It's quite unfair. Where should the leadership, come from? I think it should come from who stands to lose the most. Yeah. And again, look, I think that basically relying on something that is transitory, if you like. Probably should not be something that we lose a lot of sleep over. Of course, I mean the negotiations have kind of slowed down. In fact, they're not really happening as such. We definitely need the support to answer that question of the major powers. But you also have the members that have now come together and said, look, since nothing is happening, let's come together as middle countries and see whether we can push this forward. And they've done a credible job, I would say. And it's wonderful that when everybody else is ready, that there would be something, there would be a foundation, to kind of build on. And so I don't want to get into the apportionment of blame, and the reason is because I still do a bit of political work, and so I wouldn't like to get into that space. But I think that all of us should be asking ourselves serious questions, right now. What do we want out of the multilateral trading system? How should we make sure that what we have is sustained? How do we ensure that the rules actually are apt? And how do we start a process of reviewing, if necessary, and clarifying the rules that we have? How do we take stock? And see where we need to make changes and where we don't need to make changes. Now, I also know that the WTO ministerial is coming up very, very, very quickly. And so hopefully by that time, the bilaterals that are taking place right now and that have taken place prior, the EU, US, I think China, US is coming up, that those bilaterals will help guide what happens in the multilateral field, because we can sit here and talk about why some things are not happening and who is responsible for that, but I don't know how helpful that will be. I think what would really be much more helpful is just seeing where we are now, taking stock, and beginning to craft a roadmap so that whenever others are ready, they will come on board, very much like the joint initiatives where we do some work and allow everybody else to come on board. But again, I really stand to be corrected. I know that a lot has been written about the role that the that the current administration in the US is not playing. And I really feel that if we continued working, people would come on board because the system is to the benefit of everybody, and it has led to tremendous growth, across the board. I don't think anybody has significantly suffered, from having the multilateral system. And I don't think anybody has suffered from having, the rounds that we've had and the achievements that we have been able to make. And I think that's what I'll say as an answer, moderator, to that question of leadership. But I think we all have a role to play.
Thanks, Amina. I think Angela Ellard raised her hand like this first. So perhaps you'd like to go and then Jonathan. You need to unmute. You need to unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you. So my question kind of comes off a little bit from what inadvertently from what you just said about leadership. So I'm wondering in particular as to the role of developing members. You mentioned the outcome in fish, which was, I think, a big compromise. Now, as we see those negotiations move forward at some point, the question of S&DT really is quite acute. But I wonder, I think we're seeing some stresses among developing members, whether it's fish, where almost all members, developing or not, were ready to join a consensus, but a couple were not. Whether it is the investment for facilitation agreement, in which members who never come to the General Council, developing members, come to the General Council to say how much they support it, and yet it is blocked by a couple of members, developing members. The e-commerce moratorium, where we see again a blockage by some developing members, even though many others see this as being vitally important. How do we navigate this?
Okay, Jonathan.
It's so nice to see the minister again. Having been in the trenches, including on agricultural export subsidies in side rooms in Nairobi. Amina, you highlighted among the important and fundamental issues the presence and proliferation of industrial subsidies as part of new forms of competition. It raises two pretty important questions, even if you had ministerial engagement as you recommend. One is, aside from the fact that there aren't adequate WTO rules, is this not now a permanent feature of economic policy making for developed and developing countries alike? And if so, that takes you well beyond trade ministries to a range of other ministerial portfolios. And you, having served in various cabinet positions, will have views on how to foster domestic consensus to bring to an international table on self-discipline. And second, lurking behind that is the advent of economic security as national security. And everyone has their own definition. The United States now considers peanut butter to be a matter of national security under its 232, believe it or not. I don't know if jam follows shortly thereafter. But both of those angles take you well beyond a trade ministerial discussion into some pretty fundamental capital-based issues. So I would ask, as you reflect back on Nairobi, isn't it more what goes on at ministerial level intersessionally rather than at the next ministerial? And we don't see at the G20, at APEC, at other fora, the kind of engagement in various regions one would hope for in setting the ground, even among middle powers. So I'd welcome your reflections based on your wealth of experience.
Amina, could you take Angela's and Jonathan's questions, and then we'll go to who had their hand up? Victor, after that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me.
Yeah.
I think that first of all, in terms of the questions that were posed on the differences between developing country positions, I think we all know that developing countries are not a homogeneous group of countries, and there are different levels of development, obviously different interests. And so expecting developing countries to have similar positions all the time, I think would be counterproductive, and I think it would be too simplistic as well to believe that. I actually remember opposing some of the things, and many of you who are there would remember that may have been proposed by members of the developing countries, because at that point, our interests were kind of different, and we had to come to an understanding that we would take a position that all of us could accept, and so we would have to climb down from high horses and say that since this is really where we can only land, that's the position we're going to push forward. We are not homogeneous at all. We have LDCs amongst us. We have very, very small island countries that are extremely vulnerable and depend totally on imports. So to expect the South to have a similar position on all issues, I think would be something that I wouldn't even call for myself. But it's also true that others also have different positions, and that not all the developed countries have similar positions. In fact, on some of the subjects that we tackled, the negotiations that we had, some of the differences were so contrary to each other. They were so opposed to each other that it took some of us sometimes by surprise. But we also realized, obviously, that national security interests, as somebody has mentioned, may be different. Sometimes you come up with that in order to push a certain position. It may not be entirely the correct position, but so we are not homogeneous. But I'll tell you something about the African countries. Although we are not, again, at the same level of development, we have agreed that we are going to have an African free continental, agreement, and that is moving quite well, actually. Now you have more or less movement of goods that you can point to, visible. We have great examples of movement of persons. Movement of services, so that is moving well, and I think that if it continues moving in that way, a time will come when we can then negotiate as an African, bloc, together, having realized, or at least having laid a firm foundation on some of the standards, the measures that we need to put in place, and to harmonize amongst ourselves. So hopefully, if we get to that level, you will also see that you won't find or not, or the countries in Africa. On fisheries, I know that all members, except very, very few, actually, agreed. There was, a consensus on it, which is the way that we do business in the WTO, which I hope will continue to be the way. that we do business in the WTO. I've been hearing a lot of concerns raised around that and ideas being exchanged, but I really truly hope that we continue using that as the way to move forward. It gives comfort to everybody, but also you feel included. I think that whole argument about inclusivity, feeling that you're part of the whole. To me, it really makes a lot of sense, and I think that's what we achieved in some of the ministerials that we had. Now, I have to correct something that was said. I do not think that ministerials will solve all the problems. I think the building blocks are in Geneva. The building blocks are in Geneva. I think that I was ambassador in Geneva, and I knew how much work we actually did in Geneva to push the envelope. And how many late nights we spent in each other's homes and offices to ensure that we arrived at some form of consensus. And so I really like to pay tribute to the teams in Geneva that do the heavy lifting. I think Nairobi was an exception, actually, and that's why I said that at that point, a ministerial anyway is a ministers' meeting. And it comes up after the work has been done. Most of the work has been done in Geneva, and so I don't think that there's an expectation that at a ministerial that the ministers who've played such a key role, the ambassadors who've played a key role in Geneva, should also be the ones that would play. The key. It's a ministerial. The ministers have to also play their part. Otherwise, I don't think there's any need of them going to these meetings. I used to take exception myself as ambassador in Geneva. For instance, if I was bypassed and somebody was seeking the opinion of or the views of my minister, for instance, or on an issue that we were discussing, as if I had no connection with my capital, right? And I hope that doesn't happen, and it never happens. I know that we kind of managed to contain it a little bit, many of us who were in Geneva at that time. And hopefully that's not a way that I would suggest, or anything I said would suggest for us to follow. So I think that I hope has answered the question of the developing countries and the positions that they take. The second question was that okay, I'm sorry, let me just, it was on, I think it was on industrial policy, was it?
Right.
I'm just trying to look at the notes I wrote when the question was being asked. Oh yes, it was about yes, I remember now. Look, what I think most governments do, and I'm using my own experience, as an example, is that before engagement at any high levels, that we actually have cabinet meetings, yeah, where we thrash out these issues, and every minister then tells us where their red lines are. And it's usually the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Planning, the Office of the President, the Minister of Agriculture, and the Minister of whether it's regional trade, because in our case it was separated. And so I was handling international trade, but somebody else was handling, regional and domestic trade. And so, we would have these meetings, and we would have Jonathan, to agree on a way forward, because it is true. You're right, that it's not just the forte of the Minister of Trade. If you're discussing industrial policy, obviously you need everybody else, because you need to understand what policy space you actually need. To be able to grow your economy, and how much you can give away, right? And where the landmines are, and you cannot step on them, yeah. And the same with TRIPS and Minister of Health, right? Who was present in Geneva during some of the discussions that we held, or at least some members of that ministry were there. to just guide us on what was possible, what was not. And obviously, as either ambassador in Geneva, you want agreement. You actually want movement, and so you keep pushing the envelope, and you try to get them to agree, to move right from the red lines that they had drawn. But it's true, and I agree that it's not just about the trade ministry. The trade ministry is actually a convener of all the other ministries, because trade deals with different sectors, different issues, and so everybody has to be around the table. But that's not visible from Geneva, obviously, because then the instructions, when they come as instructions from the government, right? After we've had our conversations.
Okay, we've got 14 minutes left. We have Victor and Hamida would like to ask questions, and then there's that time left for your definitive deadline, Amina, for 4 o'clock Geneva time. So Victor first, and then Hamid, please.
Patrick, I yield to Hamid. Hamid, go first, please.
First or only?
Well, Amina, lovely seeing you. Thank you so much for your insights and your thoughts. I have a bit of not a somber view of the situation, but the reality hits really. Alan just referred to the Financial Times interview by the Prime Minister of Singapore, which I thought was quite interesting, because it's basically saying what we have been talking about for months. And it's basically about that the reality has changed. The global reality has changed. The global order has changed, and there's no going back. We're not going to go back to where we were. So basically, we are in a new situation that will continue in the current direction that it's going now. It's not a great direction, but there are realities that are quite relevant, directly relevant to the WTO. One of the most important changes that I see, or new realities, is this increasing diversity among members. We used to talk about diversity among developing countries in terms of levels of development, but what we're seeing now is also diversity among all members in relation to the trade policy direction. The trade policy directions are different now, which brings me to reckoning that what we used to call the common purpose of the system is no longer common. The common purpose has always been stability and predictability and liberalization, but predictability and stability is the most precious value of the system. This is how businesses take investment decisions. Now, in the face of this reality, we're facing structural problems, which would require, in my view, structural solutions. I don't think the kind of processes that we are used to are going to yield results going forward. Now, the first question that comes to mind here is this system is moving from being rules-based to being power-based. The question is, who wants a rules-based system among the members? Who wants it badly enough to invest political capital in it? And then how do we move from here so that we adjust the system? You would remember sometimes I used to talk years ago about not the future of the WTO, but the WTO of the future. What changes do we need to do to the system in order to align it more with the realities? Thank you.
Victor?
Thanks, Patrick. Amina, great to see you. Fond memories of Nairobi, of course. I saw your leadership there firsthand. So great to see you again. There might be some background noise here. I am in Paris at Sciences Po teaching in between courses. So I'm in the cafeteria now with students all around me. Sorry for that. Very much in the same line as Hamid, and with my new academic hat now. There's been a lot of talk about Thucydides' trap, the hegemon going up and the hegemon established going to armed conflict. And then there's another trap, which is the Kindleberger trap, when the hegemon no longer wants to ensure and to pay the price for the common good. And clearly that's what's happening now. The US does not want to pay the price to ensure the common good. Question is, will China do this? Because clearly China is the one coming up. Who has an interest in a rules-based order? Clearly China does. What's your view, Amina? How is China going to play this? Thank you.
Well,
Amina, you have 9
thank
minutes
you.
if you want to leave on time.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much. First of all, I saw and I read the interview of the Prime Minister of Singapore. It's true that the global order is changing. It's not completely changed. We're in I think a transitional phase, and I said that before. So we have a diffused order, currently, diversity of interests, and these interests are becoming more and more difficult to reconcile. And as you said, we're facing structural challenges, so we need structural decisions made, and obviously the only solutions would have to be then structural decisions. In an earlier discussion that I held 2 weeks ago, I argued that maybe the institutions that we have are ill-suited for today's realities, and that we may actually need to look at them closely, take stock, and see what works, what doesn't work, and see whether we can actually, renew them, revive them in some form to be able to respond to what's happening in real politics, actually, today. Overarching rivalries, ambition that I think has no limits, and the lack of political will to collaborate and cooperate. I think all these are realities that we are facing, and I think that anyone who's trading is interested in a rules-based system because we're using it. I don't think that that there's a country today that's not using it, and I think the proof of that is that there are panels that are working today in the WTO. I sit on one of them. The fact that countries can still go to the panels and argue their case using the rules that are in place means that there's still that interest. It may not be visible. It may not even they may not even be talking about openly, but in one of the panels that I was present at, I mean, it was clear to me that everybody still referred to the rules and wanted to abide by the rules. So again, I think that we need to think about the structures that we have, and maybe those structures were structures that are established for a different world order. And maybe that needs a bit of thinking, a bit of reflection on what needs to be done to make them responsive, because we need institutions that are responsive. And I argued, about the UN as well in the same vein, and said that we need to relook at some of these institutions. If you have an institution that was set up to deal with certain issues and they're incapable completely of addressing them, of responding to them, of challenging some of the situations that are taking place around the world, then of course it's not fit for purpose anymore. And we need to come together, because at the end of the day, most of these organizations are member-driven organizations. If we think that they're not responding to our current needs, then we should be able to honestly and candidly think about what needs to be restructured and reformed. And I think that's how I would probably answer that. And and I think in this period of disruption, in this period of uncertainty, it's true that we've moved from a rules-based system to almost a power-based system. Not completely, because again, there are countries that are trying in the middle ground, to remind us of the values that are in the system that we currently have. But I truly believe that all of us need the rules-based system. Maybe we should structure our institutions differently. Maybe we should think about some of the principles that are in there that may need change, that are not serving the purpose that they were intended for. And it actually requires that we're able to sit down and negotiate. Again, the negotiating function of these institutions. We need to see, and in a very, very candid way, without any sugarcoating. It doesn't matter how much I may want SDTs. Right? If I will not get them, then they're not useful, then they're not contributing to my economic growth. And so I need to go back and think about them and reflect on how either we can address the challenges that they have, or what else needs to be done. But I think continuing, a joke that I had about a slow train that was moving. The wheels were turning, but the train was not moving or going anywhere. But the wheels were turning, so everybody in the train thought that the train was actually heading towards a certain destination. It wasn't. And so I think we are now getting to a place where that's happening more and more. The wheels are turning, but the locomotives are not moving. And that's why actually we probably need to have a very honest discussion, and the MC that's coming up may provide the opportunity for that. But before that, also discussions must be held in Geneva to see how far we need to go to address these very, very, real difficulties that the system is facing. And I think all of us are thinking about the same things, and we're trying to write about the same things and read the same things, but there's no getting away from the fact that the order is completely diffused right now, and that the interests are so diverse that it's really difficult to bring them together. So again, we need to go back to that period when we were looking at institutions and seeing how to make them fit for purpose.
Thank you, Amina. Just 2 minutes. I wanted to say one thing that when Angela spoke about the challenges to developing country unity of action, she points out that actually there are a couple of developing countries who've been predominantly in the no mode, in order saying no. And so it becomes very difficult, including on developing country issues of interest to developing countries. So it raises the question of what our decision-making rules should be if we want to progress to WTO. Or else stay with a sort of very slow pace, being frustrated left, right, and centre by that kind of approach. And then a remark from Hector. Hector's been very shy today and not taken the floor. But he did his core point that he wants to make is that whatever happens to developing countries, of course the WTO is relevant, but some do well and some do less well, and isn't that because development fundamentally is driven by domestic policy? It's 3:59, 4:59. I think we have to let what?
I think the only thing I can say is that the Bible for everything that we do is the WTO agreement. And the preamble is quite clear about where development lies. Yeah, that's what I would say. But I think all countries need to develop, and all countries are in a process of improvements, and so I think we're all interested in development. But we're using a preamble of an agreement that tells us that we must put development at the center of our negotiations, and I think it's just right that we do that. And again, it doesn't say that if you don't need the support that you should take it, but there are those that really do need that support, and you can't ignore a huge percentage of your membership and say that they don't matter and that we can exclude them. And so Hector, I agree with you that that we need to rethink many things, and that we need to consider everything else. But you can't get away from the fact that we are actually being guided to place development at the core of everything that we do. I think when we come up with a new agreement and get rid of that preamble, then it will be much easier, I think, for us to argue that development should be at the center of our reflections, our thoughts, our considerations, our discussions, our negotiations. But for as long as it's there, you can't ignore it. It's just the same as, it's the same as was said about the rules-based system. It's there. We're actually using it. We're arguing cases, right? So, wishing it away is not something that's going to happen overnight.
Amina, you've gone 1 minute over the time that you said you would have to leave. I think what we can do now is to thank you profusely. There's never enough time in these things. I know a lot of people have much more to say, but maybe another time, another place, or maybe another negotiation. Who knows? One day, someday. Thank you very much indeed, Amina, for your time, and for everybody else for attending. And
well, thank you very much, moderator. Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you. Actually, I'm very nostalgic right now.
So many old faces, huh?
Seeing everybody, seeing Victor and Hamid and Jonathan and Carlos. I mean, seriously, Cecilia. It's just wonderful. Hector, it's wonderful to see all of you. Yeah. Alan, we're in touch, so we'll keep talking.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm tuning out. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. See you soon again. Bye-bye.